One of the necessary tasks of my job is to turn the pages, read the book reviews, browse in the bookshops. A few weeks ago, my eyes fell on a biography of Jacques Chirac, one-time president of France. He had a job that I have longed to have, but will never have. I once shook his hand when he was the mayor of Paris, before he became the president. A strikingly handsome man with strong eyes. So I picked up the book. Photographs there are always captivating. There he was on his wedding day, in fact. He even more handsome in his youth, and she magnificent, beautiful woman. And I turned the pages. Ah, yes. There they were on the last day of his presidency, the two of them getting into their car, while the new president, Sarkozy, was waving them farewell. But I stopped. Is this really them? The two of them had changed so much from that wedding photograph that we'd almost needed a DNA test to confirm that they were the same people. How age, the high life, the worries of life changes us all. We are astonished, surely, in the world of creation, that such a small caterpillar can somehow become a butterfly. An ugly little crawling thing can become an array of spectacular colours. Who could have thought of that? But will the butterfly remain a butterfly? How will it remain a butterfly? How long will it remain a butterfly? And so it comes with a message to us. When the human being reaches maturity, adulthood, how does that human being retain their peak appearance, their colourful presence, their infectious inspiration? Of course, the butterfly only has a very short life. Just a moment, as in Nigel Hawthorne's story, just one moment and it's gone. We human beings have many moments, many chances, different avenues to express our personality or the person we can be. So it's not only our physical appearance, not even about our mental apparatus, but it's about how we speak, how we express our generosity, how we relate to each other, how we relate to ourselves, how we cope with life's difficulties. The psalmist, in Psalm 34, which I read today, knew life firsthand. He was speaking right to us. I call it the prayer of the butterfly. We all want to embrace, this is the psalm, we all want to embrace the great delights of life. We all want to have a long life and enjoy all the good things. But we are constantly aware of how easily our best endeavours can be undermined and our spirits swept away into misery. And then there were those words of Jesus of Nazareth, which we read. Those words, incisive, eternally relevant, that existential injunction that applies to us at many levels of life. He said, it is time to cross to the other side of the lake. But before we go anywhere, let me ask the question. Given a blank slate, whoever would have thought of turning a caterpillar into a butterfly? Whoever would pick up a fairly messy lump of human flesh in any labour-warm ward of the hospital, and be able to say with confidence to this lump of flesh, you will become the President of France. You will become the poet Pablo Neruda. You will lead a life of kindness and compassion. You will bring music to millions. You will have a short life of anxiety and suffering, but you will touch many by your life story. When Christopher Hitchens wrote his book, that particular book, God is Not Great, he surely had not paused to consider the butterfly. It doesn't matter whether you say it was God who created the butterfly. What matters is that life has given us such a delightful gift. Not only a butterfly in its coat of many colors, its wings of morning glory, but the story of how such a beautiful creature can emerge from the remains of a caterpillar juices in a very quaint and somewhat ugly cocoon. Of course, Hitchens was right in this respect. He said religion has long been a cause of hatred and conflict, of people destroying each other's cocoons, each other's expectations of the future. But if we can encourage people to cross over to the other side of the lake, where their fears and their frights will disappear, and they'll see life can be lived in a different way, with new courage, with a new faith. We need it. Back in the 1950s, a very eminent American psychologist called Gordon Allport wrote a profoundly important book entitled Becoming. Becoming. It jolted people off their seats to recognize that the human personality was not like some unchangeable metal object, but it was always potentially open to become something different, something more. You remember the story, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's story of sand, wind, and stars? And he's traveling in the train, and the train was crowded with people who had come from the other side of the tracks and looked like it. But huddled in between a couple was a little lad. And he watched the face of this little lad. And as he watched it, he thought to himself, what could this child become? Look at his beautiful face. Here was a little Mozart. Possibility. Could become. Of course, we are so likely to get stuck in our caterpillar place and not grow through to the butterfly that could change the world for everyone who would see it. See a butterfly. And for that moment, everything changes. The butterfly comes with a message. It says, you can become something beautiful. You too can become something different. But watch out, you might end up the way I might end up in the finish. A dead specimen pinned to the wall. We can all be like that. You can get stuck in your cocoon and never develop spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, mentally. You may develop in ever so many other ways, but something somehow gets stuck. And there you are. Part of you is back there in the cocoon. You can emerge from your cocoon and never see what the butterfly sees. It gets stuck, some part of it gets stuck behind in the cocoon. I like the words of Nicoletta Freilon, once a violinist and now the chief conductor of the Australian Ballet. Did you read about her in the weekend papers? She said, I played the violin. I played for the first time in a symphony orchestra in a music camp. I was at the back of the first violin somewhere, and all of a sudden my scratchy sounds became part of something bigger. It was the opening of a world of colour. Indeed, I see music that way. And it was every kind of sense, she said, palpitating, a real feeling of excitement, not wanting it to end, and me being part of it. It led her to wanting to be the person who played with all those colours. So in a sense, you can see the butterfly separate, yet a colourful part of the world. I'm reminded of the very touching words of a friend of mine, Warren Polland, a psychoanalyst in Washington. In a recent article, he wrote these words: "One must develop ways to continue to feel individually meaningful in the world of others, even as one often finds oneself feeling increasingly invisible and irrelevant, at times like an intruder in an ever-changing world." He said one's sense of self as an outsider, a stranger, is an inescapable part of everyone's life, a discomfort that lurks in the background, that cannot be banished by a sheer proclamation. So separate, but making a contribution, a colourful contribution to the world. You might well say, how can we confidently live when the worries, the anxieties undermine our best attempts? When other people undermine our best attempts? We need to make that journey. What did he say? Cross to the other side of the lake. It's a magnificent imagery, an existential movement, in fact, where we get a different perspective and we make contact with various expressions that re-inspire and give us courage. The new faith that I advocate is not something that you sit down and study, stationary. It is not something that you find in the cloisters, sadly. It is not something you find in your various cocoons. It is not something that you say, well, maybe, perhaps, I'll think about it. No. The new faith is compelling. Once you take hold of it, it is compelling in its motion. It emerges as you cross to the other side of the lake. It is like the butterfly reflecting its power in the world as it moves. A dead butterfly is not an interesting sight. We don't know what goes on inside the butterfly's head or body. It apparently has no aggression or anger. It doesn't fight for territory or food. It simply appears to be alive with much vitality in the short time it's given. It's a great message for all of us, isn't it? It seems to be given the courage to do what it is there to do, and then it disappears. We are more complex, more demanding, more troubled. And so we need value-added experiences to lift us out of our negative preoccupations, to believe again in life's new day. I'm going to quote again from another psychoanalyst, Heinz Kohut. It's interesting, isn't it, that these men, standing outside the theological circle, speak such words. Listen to what Heinz Kohut said. He's talking about a very eminent colleague of his in an obituary, and he says this: "It is given to no man to live a perfect life, and he is blessed indeed who can achieve perfection in any one of the phases of life, be it a perfect youth with the eager encounter with the world, or a perfect maturity of impatiently vigorous action, gradually consolidating into creativity, or a perfect old age that blends realism, wisdom, and retrospective satisfaction with achievement. In our striving for some glimmers of perfection, I go back to my early question. How will we remain a butterfly? How does the adult keep developing, becoming something new, realizing that we're part of that faith which urges us to continue to become something new? From time to time, and regularly, we need to be lifted out of our internalized preoccupations so that we can let our hearts leap a little as we see the butterfly, perhaps, or something like the butterfly, with its way of living in a very uncertain world. And how does it do it? With considerable colour. And for those who see it, with inspiration. I was encouraged to turn on my iPad to listen to the all-male black Morehouse College Choir, singing their inspiring version of a well-known song, "We Shall Overcome." And I thought, we're all caught up in this issue of how will we overcome. This next week, on Friday, I think it is, is the International Women's Day. The women of the world have been gradually overcoming the discrimination and prejudice, not by any means reached the goal. But all of us in different ways, as we face our different conflicts and different experiences of life, look for that kind of faith which says we shall overcome. It speaks of that resilient courage that life gives us and that life requires. It is a power that gives new energy to the spiritual and human meaning of each day we're given. So now and again, look again at the astonishing story of the butterfly and listen to your own urge towards that creative aliveness, that ongoing being made new, that needs to be always stronger than that other inclination to fall back into our cocoons. So I put it to you today. From a pretty ordinary sort of existence, a caterpillar became a butterfly. From our ordinary existence, you can become a colourful presence in the world. That's number one. Number two, you can be strong enough to be separate, but ready to make a good contribution to the world. Number three, you can be alive with a sunshine vitality, or you can be a dead specimen, a once was, a has been. Or number four, once you're out of the cocoon, study ways to stay out, because it's so easy to go back. The projection forward requires courage. The regression can easily take over. Number five, we all know it is a short life. And it has its good moments and it has its hardships. But we need to believe in the inspiration and courage of overcoming the hardships and celebrating our resilience. Would you please stand? I invite you to gather round the holy table. Here we are in the presence of something beyond us, coming through a long tradition, and it's speaking to our human spirits. Would you sing the communion hymn?